To have everyone here. We're about to crack 100, which is really wonderful. So many people from our sector so keen to be here today. If you've just jumped into the call, we're getting everybody to pop a pin on the map where you're dialing in from. And we're going to start our conversation with Minister Kate Washington at 2:05. If you've just joined the call, just a reminder that today's conversation is going to be recorded. So if you're not comfortable being on camera, please just pop yourself your camera hidden, and otherwise it'd be lovely to see your faces if you're okay with it. Gosh, we've just cracked 105. This is so wonderful. It's really great to see so many people here. We'll give everyone one more minute before we get started. Fantastic.
So can I just check if people can see it's recording?
Yes, it is recording, Lisa.
For those just calling in now, if you can pop a pin on the map from the country that you're dialing in from to this afternoon, sorry, goodness gracious. It'd be wonderful to see where everybody's calling in from, and we'll be getting started in just 1 minute. If you haven't used Menti before, you can use it just over to the right here. There's an interaction screen. Yes, it is a bit of a small one. If you press Control and roll your mouse, it will make it a little bit larger for you so you can figure out where exactly you are. Welcome, everyone. It's so good to have so many people here. Fabulous. All right, we might get started. A really sincere and warm welcome to everybody, and thank you so much for joining our sector conversation with Minister Kate Washington today. It's really wonderful to have representation from so many parts of New South Wales. Today, I'm dialing in from Bidjigal Land, which is in the southern side of Sydney, down near the Georges River. My name is Lauren Stracey, and I am the Sector Engagement Manager here at FAMS, and really excited to be here with you all on what's going to be a really fabulous conversation. I'm now going to pass to Susan Watson, our CEO, who's going to take us through this conversation, and look forward to chatting with you all very soon.
Thanks, Lauren. And I too would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we all meet on today. And I'd like to extend my respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people joining us at our meeting. It's wonderful to see so many people here. It's great to see some of our DCJ colleagues. We have some FAMS board members here, and we know we have representatives from our ACCOs too. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for sending in your questions. We've incorporated them into 10 key questions for the Minister to respond to. As you know, our sector has seen unprecedented challenges, such as recruitment of skilled and qualified staff, increases in demand for services with no increase in funding, combined with the uncertainty for the future, especially as TEI, family preservation and housing support programs are all being recommissioned at the same time. And so are the peak bodies, Minister. So that's 4. So there will be huge stress on our NGOs and government departments during this time. We are a sector focused on early intervention and prevention. The incredible services and staff are doing their absolute best to assist children and families with the limited resources they have. At the FAMS conference only a few weeks ago, we saw hope and inspiration within our sector for change. A new government is an opportunity for change. As it's Child Protection Week, today is also an ideal time to focus on just what that change should be. Today, I'll be welcoming our Minister, the Honourable Kate Washington MP.
Okay,
Our conversation will be about building our relationship, not about throwing stones.
Put it in. We
know there is a great deal of work to do.
somewhere.
Sorry, Couldn't everyone put
I don't have
themselves on
much time.
mute?
Anyways,
if
you
don't
focus
mind?
on what you're doing, Bacha. My meeting's already started, but that's okay.
We can
We
hear
got-
you talking about your
You do
daughter
it.
or someone on the phone.
Susan, now you're on silent.
Can you hear me now? Where did I get knocked off?
Just
When you
before
tell
the,
somebody they're on mute, they need to go on mute.
yeah.
Oh, so someone muted me. Okay. Let me just backtrack a little because I don't want to miss my crescendo before introducing the minister. So we are a sector focused on early intervention and prevention. The incredible services and staff are doing their absolute best to assist children and families within the limited resources they have. At the FAMS conference a few weeks ago, we did see hope and inspiration in our sector for change. A new government is an opportunity for change. As it's Child Protection Week, today is an ideal time to focus on just what that change should be. Today, I'll be welcoming our Minister, the Honourable Kate Washington MP. Our conversation will be about building our relationship, not about throwing stones. We know there's a great deal of work to do, and as your peak body, our job is to advocate and in some cases, challenge the government. Firstly, though, we need to understand their vision and priorities. So let's get started. Welcome, Minister. Thank you so much for your time today. Can you begin by telling us about yourself, who you are when you're not Minister Kate Washington?
Thanks, Susan, and thanks, Lauren, and thanks to everyone who's online today and to all the team at FAMS. Thank you for the invitation. And so soon after your conference, I'm keen to hear how your conference went as well at some point during, I don't know whether it'll be today or maybe we'll catch up a bit later. And I too want to pay respect to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation where I'm zooming in from today. This morning I left the beautiful Worimi lands, which is part of the answer to who I am when I'm not Minister Kate Washington. I'm MP Kate Washington, the member for Port Stephens. So that's really my whole life at the moment is as the very proud member for Port Stephens, and it's a beautiful community. I absolutely love representing it, and I've represented the area since 2015, and I am now spending a lot more time in Sydney than I used to, and it's an interesting straddle trying to do both of those. Occasionally when I'm not Minister or MP, I'm also mum to 3 kids who are 22, 20, and my youngest is finishing her HSC this year. So I'm being a pretty bad backup crew for my HSCer, but you know, she's through my many years of being in politics, she's learnt to be very independent and resilient. So we're relying on that to get us through.
Yeah. One of the things my mum taught me was her mantra was next to love is independence. So I think you're doing okay. We understand you expressed your interest in communities and justice portfolio after your time in the Shadow Ministry, which is where I first met you. So what motivated you to choose this portfolio and what drives your passion?
It's a big question, but yes, I did ask to have this portfolio and the portfolio for disability inclusion as well, because I held both of them as a shadow minister. And I'd been a shadow minister for 7 years in different roles. So I'd had environment, early childhood education, a whole range of different shadow portfolios. But when I landed in this one, I really got to understand the complexity, the difficulty, the challenges, and the enormous need to do better. So when we formed government, which was really, you know, that was in itself a real privilege. But then to actually be given the opportunity to come into a ministry, and I did ask for this. So I'm really driven by the desire to make a difference, and I came into politics with that. I know it sounds a bit cliched, but it's true. And I figured in this role, there's enormous opportunity to make a really big difference in a lot of people's lives. So it's the kind of, I know that that's why most people who are online would be doing the work that you do as well, to make a difference in people's lives every single day. And I join with you in that purpose.
Thank you. Tell us about your vision for the child protection system and the government's top priorities for the sector.
Well, the vision is probably something I share with everyone as well. The ultimate goal should be to be supporting families sooner, strengthening communities, making communities far more resilient, so that families have the support that they need. So ultimately, we see children staying with families rather than coming into a system that can cause so much harm. So that's got to be the goal. And how we get there, that's I think it's been the challenge for everyone, and it's a challenge in every jurisdiction. But the more research we've got, the more data we've got, the more shared information we've got, the more there is to inform the reform of the system that we desperately need.
Thank you. So recognising the vital role that small to medium-sized organisations play in the child protection system, how do you plan to ensure that these NGOs aren't disadvantaged during the recommissioning process? And as I said earlier, some of these small to medium organisations will be recommissioning for 3 or more different contracts.
I appreciate how challenging the recommissioning process is, and Susan, you mentioned earlier that, you know, there's stress coming down the line for people who are online, and that's far from what I would like to be imposing on everyone, given the importance of the work that you do, and where I know your energy, you want to be putting your energy, is not into, you know, putting in more tenders and recontracting. You would rather be putting that towards the families and communities and the children that you support. So I firstly, I want to recognise that. In terms of as we head towards that recommissioning process, I just hope that we're going to be able to have a really good working relationship, and I know that we already do, with peaks, particularly FAMS, obviously, because then we will hear from the sector about how we can do it better with you, hand in hand. And I also want to recognise the importance of all organisations, regardless of size. It's not about the size or the number of staff. It's your outcomes. It's what you're achieving in your communities with the contracts you've got. That's what we ought to be focusing on. So that's going to be key for me in the recommissioning process, is focusing on outcomes. And I have seen some of the smallest programs on the ground delivering amazing outcomes, because they've seen the need in the community in which they work, and they're meeting that need. That's what I think, you know, everyone aims to do, and, you know, regardless of size, that's got to be the focus in terms of contracting.
That's very, very reassuring for our small to medium organisations, because it is one of the biggest challenges that we have. So over the past decade, the sector has not seen an increase in funding, despite the growing complexity of referrals and the need for high quality services. Moreover, overheads and staffing costs have risen, and families are facing increasing pressures. What steps does your government intend to take to ensure the stability and resilience of the sector moving forward?
Yeah, it was one of the shocking things I realised when we came into government, that in the targeted early intervention part of the massive DCJ budget, that there had been no increase in any funding for a decade, and I'd heard it said, but to see it actually as a brief, that was shocking. So the difficulty is, and I'm just going to be saying it like it is, and as I did at your conference, the enormous challenge we've got is the overall DCJ budget, particularly in child protection, where I'm literally having to find $250 million to prop up the system as it's currently functioning. Now, there's a lot that we need to be doing to focus on repairing the budget so that then we can do what we want to be doing, which is getting more spend down in the earlier on in the system into the early intervention and supporting families sooner. So that's my focus, is on repairing the budget so that we can then put funds where our priorities are.
You're stolen my thunder for my next question. But many of us have heard about your budget limitations, and although we appreciate that's an issue, what I'm starting to hear across the sector is all we keep hearing is there's no new money, and that's what we've been hearing for 10 years. So how do you see that you're going to address this for the future? What sort of time frame are we looking at? We understand there's got to be budget repair, but you are going to be recommissioning. So what are your, can you give us some idea of how you are going to address this in the short to medium term?
Well, I've got to say, what caused this budget mess has been failed policies of the past. They've been allowed to continue and spiral out of control. And it includes particularly where the overspend is, and the obscene amount of money being spent on children going into hotels and motels and high-cost emergency arrangements, as they are called. So we also know that not only is an obscene amount of money being spent on those arrangements, it's also the most harmful place for any child to be. So it is an absolute priority of mine to reduce the number of kids going into hotels and motels, and we have to do that through a number of different measures, and that will include recruiting more foster carers, but there is a lot more than just that. And I appreciate also the challenges of recruiting foster carers in the current environment with a high cost of living, all of that. But there's going to have to be a number of different measures introduced to stop the spiralling out of control system that we have inherited.
So beyond that, any clues?
Well, there is an enormous amount of work being done and to be done, and it has to be done in a short period of time to be able to get things under control again. So I'm not in a position to start setting it all out, but needless to say, there's going to be short-term, medium-term, long-term goals that we are going to be trying to meet in a reform process. But also, we're going to be talking and consulting with the sector as we take those steps, because it's no point not learning from everyone who's been doing this for a long time. We don't want to be coming in and dictating to anyone how this is going to work. We're going to be drawing on everyone in the sector, and I keep being amazed by the goodwill of everyone that we're meeting, everyone, all the peaks and all the different organisations to work with us to help us on this path of reform.
Yeah, certainly for us, we will be looking for windows of opportunity to be able to, I think on behalf of the sector, it's a message. There needs to be a message that we've been heard, because we have been saying this for so long, and it is very difficult to get a budget under control. It's like trying to manage a budget of an intensive care unit in a hospital while you're also trying to stop people going into the intensive unit in the first place. But I think what we're looking for is some signals, and it's good to hear that you're going to consult with us, and we'll look forward to those opportunities as to finding, because as I said at the conference, we've been, we're working on the smell of an oily rag, and now we're going to be asked to work even more tighter to achieve bigger outcomes, and the sector is starting, we're feeling burnt out. So we're really looking forward to seeing those messages and signals in our sector.
And if I might, Susan, yeah, absolutely. And if there is any opportunity for me to be doing anything sooner, and I will be absolutely going there. Like, we know where the most impact is made, and there's no question on that front. And there's also opportunity, because my colleagues and I are wanting to work together across health, education, justice, police. We've all got an interest in putting the work in earlier, and that supporting the work that your members do and that everyone online does, because all of my colleagues in those different areas all reap the benefits of the work that's done, strengthening communities, keeping families together. So there's opportunities beyond, and as I see it, the solutions lie beyond the child protection system.
Yeah, and opening up to the opportunities that I know you have spoken to as Minister about, the fact that you do work very closely with your ministerial colleagues. And that may be the opportunity for some also sharing of some funding to invest in this dire sector that really needs some support, perhaps across portfolios, rather than having to deal with this massive budget. So we'd be really interested to talk to you a little more about that. And I know our sector will be too. So if you need a working party or a group together, I think we could call them very fast to have a conversation with you. So our sector was called for greater flexibility in contracts to accommodate family and community-focused responsive services delivery, especially during disasters, for providing step-up and step-down support to services, rather than adhering to what has historically been, we'll just have a one-size-fits-all and services have to adapt to that. How is the government addressing the demand for flexibility in contracts going forward?
I appreciate the question and appreciate the reason for it, because I've heard it a lot, and so that the need for flexibility to meet needs as they change within a community is something that we're going to be trying to do, and I think there's the important. It's important that we're going to be able to measure outcomes as well, and for the sake of your membership as well, so that we can ensure that the outcomes that we need are being achieved. But I fully understand that there is a real value also in trying to give flexibility, so that, especially in times of natural disaster and as other things change in different communities, and every community is different as well. So one size fits all isn't where we want to be. So I haven't got the answer for you today on that, but it's something that I'm well aware of, and have been hearing since before we got into government, and as well in my own community, and speaking with my local providers, knowing, seeing what they do with what they get is really impressive. But I know that there's opportunity for more if they had fewer constraints and the need to tick so many boxes. They could be doing more.
Thank you. So earlier this year, the Australian Child Maltreatment Study revealed some shocking insights about the prevalence of child maltreatment in Australia and its profound long-term impacts on children. And I know we have talked about this, and it's something that you have been really working on. How does your government plan to respond to these findings, particularly in terms of early intervention and prevention?
The ACMS really floored me. The report was so shocking, and there was a number of takeaways from it for me, and that I can't stop talking about it with a lot of people who either work in the area or don't as well, and just firstly, more people need to understand what it revealed. That's something that I'm trying to work out how we get it more understood across community, because it is calling for a cultural change. It has to be more than government. It has to be a whole of community, whole of government response. It's a conversation that is being led federally, because the report was funded federally as well, and we have a meeting of community services ministers nationally, led by Minister Amanda Rishworth. So through the Safe and Supported framework, there is a lot of different elements of the ACMS that's being discussed at the federal national level, and how we implement that through the Safe and Supported framework and into our practice on the ground. So going forward, I'm convinced we need to be informed by those findings, because to hear that, emotional abuse and it makes sense, but emotional abuse having such long-term outcomes, and even sometimes worse outcomes than neglect, and on a par with sexual abuse, there's a number of different findings that that we really need to firstly be acting on, but also ensuring that it's informing our reform process as well.
So, Minister, this national program of response, I have to ask the question, will there be funding allocated to that program that will be rolled out for the states to use?
That's still to be discussed, Susan. And I mean, essentially, because child protection is a state responsibility, it's up to us at this stage. And I am convinced that we have a very large bucket of funding that sits with the Department of Communities and Justice, particularly and for child protection. And it's just how we use it. And that's what I have to ensure through our reform process, that we are using it in the best way possible. And as I said before, we know that the biggest impact comes earlier, and we've just got to shift that dial. And I know that that's everyone online's probably heard that before, and we're going to be working with you to try and get there.
Okay. But during your keynote at the FAMS conference, you spoke about the need for the system to be reimagined to effectively support Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and families, and to begin to address the overrepresentation of these families in the child protection system. Can you share your government's approach to achieving change?
The approach to addressing the overrepresentation of Aboriginal children in the child protection system is one of collaboration and partnership. It's the only way we are going to see a significant shift in that. The appalling statistics, the appalling realities on the ground that you all see, is if we give more authority to Aboriginal controlled organisations, to Aboriginal communities and to Aboriginal families. So we held our 2-day stakeholder forum with about 100 Aboriginal stakeholders and leaders from the child protection sector. It was a powerful 2 days, and from that we are creating a governance group that the attendees are working on creating, so that they can work in partnership with us on the way forward, because that if we don't work in partnership, we're not going to be able to get the changes that we need to make.
And Minister, was there early intervention and prevention represented at that 2-day forum?
Yes, absolutely. There were representatives from the sector across the whole spectrum.
Right, because I'm aware that in our work with ABSEC that a lot of our ACCO colleagues are wanting to move into the early intervention space. So we don't want what we've seen, and even in our conversation today, it tends to get consumed with the pointy end, and so we don't want to lose that momentum in that shift of reimagining our sector.
And it was a big focus of the conference too, Susan, because everyone knows the work needs to be in supporting community culture, keeping families together and on country in culture. So that's got to come early in the piece, and so it was a big part of the conversation.
That's good to hear. So we've got to question number 10. You made it. We're going to be nice and gentle with you for this one.
Were you expecting me to walk before now?
No, not at all. Having spent nearly 6 months now getting to know the landscape of the sector, tell us about what inspires you and gives you hope for the future.
Well, I've spent a lot of time initially trying to get my head around the challenges that we have inherited, and also how the whole system works, not a small thing, whilst also gaining parental responsibility for over 13,000 children after I was sworn in. But I've also spent a lot of time meeting with NGOs, people doing the work on the ground, caseworkers from DCJ across the state. And I'm just continue to be blown away by everyone who's working in the sector. Like I'm just, every time I go to another organisation, I walk away completely inspired by the dedication, the commitment, and the tenacity in the face of really difficult funding circumstances, really difficult environments you're working in, and the complexities and the emotional challenges that everyone faces as well. So I feel very fortunate to be the minister for this area, because there are so many people across the state working so hard, doing everything that they can, and it inspires me to be able to get into a position where I can back them up and back you all up in the work that you do.
Thank you, Minister. So we've got a little bit of time, so I'm going to ask Lauren or Bronte if they've been keeping an eye on the chat, just to see if there's any new questions in there that we might be able to, if you're okay with that, Minister.
Absolutely.
Are there any themes coming out from today?
I think at this stage, what we're noticing more is more comments in response to the minister's conversation here. So if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to jump in the chat now and ask them. I think what we're seeing. Yeah.
Straight up. Sorry. My name's Kim McCausland. I'm the CEO down at Illawarra Multicultural Services. I've been in the industry for over 40 years, worked with most areas. But I think one of the things, Minister, that I'd like to probably express is, and I've worked with the Darrell people in Campbelltown for a long time. I live in Campbelltown as well. I have a very high respect there for the work that the medical services has done with the big changes in how they're working with their own communities. And I fully respect that. Having worked in the multicultural refugee area for quite a long time as well, I'm really concerned that they're being forgotten, the multicultural and the refugees in the families. In that when I go to DCJ meetings, and I'm not saying, I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way, and that's probably why I started the way I have, and I put it in the chat, I would really like the Minister and your team to actually give the same respect to the refugee communities and the multicultural communities as you are to the Aboriginal communities about and learning from what's gone wrong there to working with the multicultural and refugee communities. And especially, as I said, I've worked in a long time. I'm now working with the people that have come, the refugees from the Myanmar community, so Burmese, Karen. I've never worked with such vulnerable people before in my life. There is no money. And we're expected federally to work with them. I get TEI money as well, but we only get the beginning money. We don't get the money to work long-term, more intensive work. I'm not sure who actually does anymore, really. But we are seeing they're hidden and they're forgotten. And I'm really concerned. And it's really hard to get anybody to listen to you. So thank you for this opportunity. And I'm sorry if I've jumped in and taken over a bit. But the other point too is that I think DCJ needs to look who they employ, because there's many. I went for a position, 40 years experience. Had an interview, didn't even got called back to tell them I didn't get the job. You know, like I work with them all the time. I know that, but I just find that, and I'm not the only person, people got really great experience aren't getting these jobs. Yes, young, I don't know who they're giving them to, but sorry, but don't be disrespectful. But they need to be looking at that. NGOs, we work hard and we work on a dime. So I think that might be somewhere you need to look a little bit more at. No disrespect, it's probably the hardest portfolio you could probably ever have. But I think that I know refugees money is federal, but not families. Families is long-term, and there's a real concern. But that would be my point. But thank you.
So what was your name again? I missed it at the beginning.
Sorry, it's Kim McCausland, and I am from Illawarra Multicultural Services, and we do have TEI funding. We have 600,000 for just not even 600,000 for the whole area to do what we do, playgroups, the work. So it's not a great deal of money at all to pocket. It's nothing.
Thanks, Kim. Point well made in terms of refugees, and and other multicultural groups, and the challenges that those communities are facing are enormous. And I've got to say, my colleagues that represent some of the areas where a lot of those communities are around Western Sydney, they are frequently raising with me their concerns for the communities that you're speaking about.
I think the main thing that I brought up really is that the respect that the government's given and the learnings that you've learnt, and that you've said it in the past about working what the other government didn't do or departments didn't do, but this group needs to be respected as much as, like to learn from those areas. Sorry, I think that's a big thing. Take the learnings and use them, because we do know how to work with our communities extremely well.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got another question.
I can't
I'm happy to control this.
Hey, Kate. I'm not new to you. I have met with you a few times. And you met with a couple of our young people of Uniting last year and the year before. So my question is actually, so I'm the program manager for extended care and aftercare with Uniting. And I'm just a little bit, I feel like we as a sector have been kept in the dark space. I mean, it's almost been a year since the announcement was made by our previous minister that we were going to get $100 million towards extended care. And now 12 months later, we've had barely consultations with the sector. The only announcement that was more or less made and what was really put in implementation is the allowances for our carers and for our young people. But for the rest, it has been really, really quiet on DCJ side. And about 3 months ago, I had the benefit of attending the Homestretch conference in Melbourne. And I was pleasantly surprised by all our other neighbouring states. And I was really, really shocked and really disappointed how our New South Wales government was presenting on what they're doing in that extended care space. And I'm just really I know you're very passionate about it as well, but I would like to find out, and I mean, my core partners in the sector as well, what is happening in that extended care space. I mean, there was a little bit more information about your choice, your future, but nothing has come across besides those allowances. And again, you know as well, it's not just about providing carers and young people with some extra funds. It's about the care and the support that is being given to families and young people, young care leavers. That's what is really key. And I just feel it's been really, really silent on DCJ side.
Okay, thank you. Can I come back to you on that? Because that's the first, well, I haven't heard criticism of where that's gone from, courtesy of the decision made by the former government. So I understood that was all in train, and I'll have to come back to you on that.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. We got probably
there was one question that came up in the chat, which I thought I'll just raise because it was just a little while ago. There's some people from the sector just raising the role of adolescent and family counsellors. So these are specialised counsellors that are funded under TEI to be able to support to be able to provide free counselling to adolescents and their families. And there's been some sector concern around these roles actually disappearing, that they're not as common anymore, and that the roles, rather than being given to specialised counsellors, are being given to youth workers who provide amazing support but may not have the capacity to do the clinical aspects of the role. So just wondering if you have any sort of comment on that, and whether that's going to be something that's going to be a priority when we look at recommissioning.
That's interesting feedback as well. Not something that I am in a position to address today, I'm sorry, but I'm happy to get I mean, I can follow up with FAMS on that and get a briefing from the department, because I'm not sure where that's at. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Just going through, we probably have time for one more question, do you think?
Yeah,
Susan?
one more, I think.
Hi, Kate. I'm echoing or reassured that you're saying that we need a whole of government approach to this, because what I've seen is the attrition of services in the health system, in the disability space, has meant that more and more vulnerable people are coming to TEI services with significant complex needs, and we are not equipped to handle that. And the reduction in counselling, family counselling and adolescent counselling services in TEI space means that we've got less than less qualified workers attempting to manage highly complex individuals and families, and with wait lists in other services. And I think this is more impactful in the outer lying areas because you can't go across LGAs to go to another service. The distances are too great, the transport costs are too much. So I think a whole of government approach is one of the ways forward, but also building that collaborative practice amongst governments. We don't know our Centrelink staff anymore, and they keep sending us inappropriate referrals. We can't get a meet with them. The health staff, you see at rare instances. It would be great if there was capacity for those organisations and agencies to meet at an interagency level. We have a very effective interagency, but people like that aren't showing up.
Thank you. And 100%. And unless we are collaborating on the ground across agencies, across different levels of government, we're not going to be getting the outcomes that we need. And more broadly, in terms of our government's approach, it's about delivering on our commitments, which is rebuilding the foundations of all of our communities in public health, public education, public housing and public transport. Those are the elements, and I've seen it in my community, that eroded over the last decade, and we're going to be focusing our energies and our funding on trying to rebuild those foundations. But the importance of working across different agencies is something that we're all well aware of. I also want to mention, I'm also, because of my disability inclusion portfolio responsibilities as well, there are really interesting conversations being had at the federal level in terms of the NDIS review. If we get this right in terms of creating, there needs to be more community capacity to be able to provide foundation supports for all families, regardless of whether they have any diagnosis or anything that they are presenting with. So those conversations are being had with the federal government as part of the NDIS review. There's this current a fairly perverse incentive at the moment to get into the review, into the NDIS, because there's nothing sitting outside of it. And I can understand what you're saying is that a lot of these families with really complex needs are now coming to TEI services, and that's not really what that whole funding's designed for, and it's putting more stress on your services. So I hear what you're saying, and there's some really interesting conversations. Where those responsibilities lie, that's going to be the challenge, because when states all put their resources into the NDIS, it was meant to have been to provide that ecosystem of supports outside of the NDIS as well, and it never happened. So we need to get the NDIS fixed. We need to ensure that there are supports sitting outside of it. What they look like, it's got to come from across different agencies as well. But that's really going to be, again, in that early intervention space that you're all working in, and there's enormous opportunities on this front. And opportunities in terms of getting much better outcomes for people and for families and children. That's always the goal. And it's the merging of my two portfolios is really has real potential for some real change in the system down the track, hopefully.
Minister, I'm sure you can see from the amount of people who have been with us for this almost an hour and the passion of the voices that you've heard in those few questions that we as a sector are really anxious for change. We are ready for it, and we look very much to you to work with us in making that happen. I'd like to thank you, Minister, for your honesty and transparency in the questions that we put to you. And we really look forward to working with you and your team to reimagine our sector and see more investment into the early intervention and prevention space. And as the peak body for this space, we will be holding you to account and look forward to coming back together with you in 2024 to start seeing some of those changes being put into action. Thank you also to all of our attendees. And don't forget to tag the Minister and her team when you post on LinkedIn so that she can see the amazing work that you're doing to support children and families through what can be very complex and difficult times. Because she's very much said to us she wants to work with us. So let's make sure she can see what's happening out there. And we will continue as your peak body to advocate on your behalf. And we'll be having more sector conversations and looking for ways that we can work with the Minister and her team in developing and designing our new sector going forward to be a more of a supporting sector, not a reporting sector. So thank you again, everyone, for your time, and we look forward to coming back again in 2024, Minister.
Thank you, Susan.
Again.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you to the FAMS team, and thank you to everyone online. I hope you managed to have your lunch. And thank you for everything that you're doing to support families and communities, genuinely.
Okay. Thank you.